Okay, so a little more detail on actually selling your timber. We talked about planning ahead and hiring a consultant. I'll go into these in a little more detail. You want to choose your sale type, invite bids, sign a contract, monitor the harvest, and modify your plan. So I'll make an analogy here. As an owner of a house plot, and you want to build a house, I don't think anyone would go right to a building contractor and say, I would like a house, please build me one. There's generally a plan involved, right? Or you have an architect that's created a plan for your house. Because the builder's job is not to design the house, it's to create it. So you have that intermediate party here, the architect. It's the same idea in selling timber. The logger's job is to do an excellent job removing the timber, getting it to the mill, and paying you for your timber. His job is not to make sure that your land benefits from it, or that your habitat goals are reached. A good logger will make sure that those things happen, but that's not really their primary purpose as a professional logger. Those roles fall to the forester, and that's really why you want to involve a forester in the timber sale process. They make sure that your goals will not be compromised by the timber harvest, and make sure you get the most money that you can for your timber. And of course, they have to make a living too, so they take part of that. But in this example here, you can see how a lot of times, almost all the time, the landowner will either make more money or at least the same amount by hiring a forester. So we have the same amount of timber to be harvested here. The forester, because he knows the market, he knows the loggers, he has a reputation, or he has a relationship with the loggers, he can get you a higher price for that timber. As a landowner, it's hard to keep track of what the prices for timber are. There's almost no way to do that unless you actually ask people who have recently sold timber what the price they've gotten was. And that gross revenue, you can see in this example, is $4,000 extra dollars. And then there's some other factors in here, which ends up with you getting in your pocket with a forester, whatever the difference there is, 17,000 around there. And on top of that, you get all these additional benefits: preparation of a timber harvest plan, reforestation service, spraying, tax preparation, all these long-term kind of tasks that the forester can help you with. The logger is just in there, harvests your trees, and moves on to the next stand. So a lot of great reasons to hire a consultant. When you are doing this, going through this process, some things you want to try to do to pick the right one for you. Talk to some friends and neighbors who have done a timber sale in the past. Ask for references from the consultant. Talk to their other customers. They should be willing to show you one of the recent logging jobs that they've worked on. Ask about their prices and what services they offer, and if they're a member in the Society of American Foresters, if they have any additional qualifications. And just make sure you get along. You want to have this should be the beginning of a beautiful relationship, really. This shouldn't be just a one-time thing. It should be, helping you manage your forest land through the rest of your life, hopefully. And this doesn't mean coming in every month, but at least every 15 years, you'd want to check in and reevaluate your plan, make sure everything's still developing according to it, and make any changes as necessary. You always want to have a contract. And you want to talk about whether he's going to write you a certified stewardship plan, if he's going to perform any or all of these services like measuring and marking for the sale, soliciting bids for the sale, collecting money, planning roads and landings, inspecting the site as the harvest is happening, assessing any damage that the logger does to your trees or your soil. And then the fees will depend on which of these services he actually does. And remember, no handshakes. Make sure you have a signed contract. So marking trees is especially important because this is really where the decisions are made on your land as far as what gets harvested and what the future of the forest is going to look like, depending on what's taken and what's left behind. So this is really something you'd want your forester to do. And a lot of times they'll blaze it where it's easy to see, and also down at the stump. So you can make sure that you can actually mark the trees that are not to be taken. So the idea here is you can still see that blaze if they were to cut that tree. Call them on it, basically. You want to choose your sale type. So there's basically 3 different ways to collect the money or to calculate the money that the logger owes you. Here's the lump sum, and this is usually what we recommend and usually what people do. It's based on the stand volume and the value as determined before the first tree is even cut, and all the money is paid before the first tree is even cut. And that's, of course, preferred by landowners because there's no risk on their part, especially if they have a forester working for them. They have a fair calculation of the value of the trees. The loggers agree on that value and pay them ahead of time. So there's not much risk there. You can also do a sale by unit. And this is when the trees are measured as they're cut. There's some complications here because it's dependent on the log rule. Because a tree is basically a cone, it's very difficult to accurately estimate the board feet in that tree. Anyone know what a board foot is? What was it?
1 foot square by 1 inch thick.
Yeah, 12 inches by 12 inches by 1 inch. And that's how we measure lumber in the industry. So each tree has a certain amount of board feet in it that actually comes out the other end of the mill. But because it's a cone and because it's a cylinder or round, there's different ways to estimate that, and there's different rules. So if the logger tells you a certain amount per board foot, and your forester tells you, well, that's a good deal, but then the logger uses a different rule, that creates problems. So that does require some trust, but it is preferred by the logger because they don't have to put that money up front. They're basically paying you as they get paid by the mill. And a similar system is a percentage basis. Again, it's measured as cut. This is dependent on how good a job the logger does at utilization. So are they really sending the highest value logs to the right mill to get the highest value products? Are they bucking it to get the highest value logs in the first place? And so on and so forth. And this requires probably even more trust. And again, it's preferred by the logger because they're paying you as they get the money from the mill. So after you decide that, the next step would be to invite bids from loggers. So you'd want your consultant to send out these bids or a request for bids. And that request should include a description of the timber for sale, including the diameter of the trees, the species, the estimated board feet, the location terms, date and time for a stand tour, and a deadline to receive the bids by. And once a logger has all this information and he has a chance to look at the timber, he can decide what he's willing to pay for that amount of timber. So we'll send that in. Generally it's a sealed bid, so the loggers aren't actively competing against each other. They don't know what each other is bidding. Generally you meet with your forester to open the bids, and then you look them over. You're not required to select the logger who offers the most amount of money. Ideally, you have a lot to choose from, and that amount of money is definitely one of the things you want to think about, but you also want to think about the reputation of the logger. Generally, your forester will know exactly what that reputation is, good or bad, and if they have any additional qualifications, for example, the Master Logger Program, which I happen to run, and we have directories of loggers who are trained and educated by our program, if you're interested in that. If you only have a few bids and it's not a lot to choose from, that agreement should say, that you sent out to the logger, should say you have a right to reject any and all of the bids. You don't have to go ahead with any of the bids that you receive. It's just a request for an offer. And if that's the case, then your forester can help you contact other loggers directly or negotiate a better price, or just wait a year and see if the market improves. So this is time to sign another contract, assuming you've chosen a logger to go with. Again, handshakes are non-binding. So don't trust a handshake. I'm sure there are many loggers out there who are true to their word, but there's no way to legally guarantee that. So once all this happens, your consultant still has some work to do. You should review the harvest plan with the logger before the harvest, visit the site regularly during the harvest, monitor damage to the site, and make sure the BMPs are in place, and either return the performance bond that ensures that they do a good job, or keep whatever portion of it is needed to fix any damage they've done. And as we mentioned, the slash and brush piles and the dense vegetation as a result of logging are a great place for wildlife to nest and raise their young. In these messy areas, keep wildlife in the area and increase viewing opportunities, especially in the winter. So once you've done all this, you want to go back into your forest and reevaluate your stewardship plan. Make sure it's still accurate and that you can still achieve your goals with the new condition of that forest. Okay, so to wrap up, some things you can actually do this weekend or over the next couple of weekends. Evaluate your available labor and money resources. You probably know how much money you have in your pocket, and you probably know how much money you have in your family's joint account if you have one, but don't assume that your family is as gung-ho about early successional habitat as you are. You want to actually have a conversation. Make sure that if you're counting on any sort of joint resources, including labor or even your own time, that's okay with all of your stakeholders, be it your wife or your children or whoever. Talk to a professional, so some of these echo bobs, which is good. Paying for services of a consultant in the planning stages can save you a lot of time, money, and aggravation later. Write it down. Even if you have a great plan that's kind of swirling around in your head, the process of actually putting it on paper not only works out some of the kinks you may not have realized were there, but also it makes it a lot more likely that you'll actually do the steps that you lay out. Divide and conquer. It can be overwhelming to try to manage a large property all at once. So think about how to divide it into small pieces, both a single project and the property as a whole. So it's a good idea to say, well, this patch of oaks over here I'm going to manage this way, and I'm going to get this done in the next 2 years. And then I'm going to worry about the patch of tulip poplars over there after that. Break it up so you can actually achieve some of these smaller goals that lead up to your bigger ones. And set deadlines that will help you stay on track and make sure that your projects are completed in the most appropriate time of year, so you're not planting trees in the heat of the summer, and so forth. Okay, so I think we're holding questions actually, but I hope that elucidates the timber selling process and gives you some more to think about.
Nevin, thank you very much.
Sure.
Why don't we take a 5-minute break?